Investing, it's not about gambling, it's not about the short-term profits. It's really about that patient, long-term game which we are playing. Keeping to that one goal helps in sort of compounding that returns.
In Singapore, where every dollar counts, reaching that 100K mark in your stock portfolio may be a big deal. Join us as Willie Keng, founder of Dividend Titan, sheds light on why this target holds such importance and how it can pave the way for financial stability and growth in our dynamic market. Hi Willie, welcome to the show. How are you?
Hi Roshan, love to be here today.
Yeah, fabulous. So let's begin. Willie, could you share your insights on why setting a goal of reaching 100K in stocks can be a meaningful milestone for aspiring investors?
Yeah, I think that's a great starting question, Roshan. I think number one, first and foremost, is to have that kind of mindset and to have that confidence. The problem with investing in the stock market sometimes is it can be a bit too overwhelming and it can be too complex. On the way, they might lose focus or they might get dejected if, let's say, the stock market is down. But if one is able to actually gradually accumulate or grow this amount to, say, a targeted figure, that sort of not only adds more confidence to the investor, but at the same time, it helps to motivate that person. Because don't forget that investing, it's not about gambling, it's not about the short-term profits. It's really about that patient, long-term game which we are playing. Keeping to that one goal helps in sort of compounding that returns.
So building on that, can you share insights on why achieving this goal is not only important, but also feasible for young investors?
So there are a couple of reasons here to hit to $100,000. Maybe I'll just share a bit of my personal story. So I started off saving and making money on the side, and I sort of saved up to, for example, my first $10,000, then $50,000. And then around in my 20s, I hit my $100,000 mark. Now, when I hit that mark, it really helped me in a couple of ways. Number one, I could actually change the strategy of my portfolio. Say, for example, $100,000 allows you to, for example, go into a dividend strategy where if you are getting, say, a 5% yield on the $100,000 portfolio, that gives you a very comfortable $5,000 a year dividend, which can pay for a lot of the expenses. That's one. Number two, to hit that $100,000, it also, if you think about it, if you continue, the compounding effect grows exponentially more. So if you think about this mathematically, if you can hit, let's say, a conservative 10% annual returns a year, in 7 years, you have probably doubled this amount, $100,000 to $200,000. And that's assuming not putting any more money inside that portfolio. So you can actually grow your portfolio at a much faster rate once you hit that first six-figure sum. So it helps to really boost or give you that motivation when you start building that portfolio. And of course, lastly, when you hit that $100,000 mark, it sort of gives you that inner calm or belief that, hey, I can do this. And hitting that six-figure mark will also tell me, okay, I'm just going to push forward. Whatever I earn from my job or my salary, that active income, I can continue to deploy in that portfolio and continue to grow it because it tells me that, hey, this is possible.
Okay, wow, your motivation is really rubbing off. There are different groups in the society, right? Given that many younger investors may have limited funds to start with, what are some practical steps they can take to begin their journey toward the 100K mark?
So the first and foremost which I would do is to start saving. And one of the key lessons which I've learned after investing for more than 13 years is it's not just about focusing our attention and time on trying to get the highest returns or the best returns from the stock market. But actually, when it comes to investing, you need what I call a twin growth of engine. That means you invest and find good stocks which gives you healthy returns, modest returns for your portfolio. But on the other hand, you also want to save. That means mercilessly cutting, costs, your money expenses, which you might not feel that is necessary. So you really reduce that to a minimum. So not saying that it has to be a bare minimum, but something where you're comfortable with. So for example, for myself, right, when I started working in my earlier 20s, I didn't start off with, a high salary, but what I did was I was able to actually save at least more than half of my salary. I was slightly lucky because I didn't really have to fully support my parents, for example, to pay them, a large portion of my salary for them as allowance because they're still working. So that allowed me to save a portion of my salary. That's one. And through saving, there are things where I didn't really focus on too much. So unlike many of my peers, my friends, when they started working, they'll start buying some of the fancy watches. It is not an issue. Like, people like what they want to buy. But for me, I just don't go for the expensive watches. For example, I don't try to aim for a car or an expensive house. Back then, my then girlfriend, now wife, we just went for an HTB. We said, okay, no cars, just go for public transport. And we just, spend our time on very simple activities, movies, meals, or even just go to the park or the beach for cycling. So that allows me to save up a large portion of my income and I just plow it into the stock market. So it's a mixture of saving and investing. So when you're starting out, as a beginner investor, don't keep thinking about, okay, I just want to get the best returns. Think about, how am I going to start building that active income first so that it allows me to build and grow that capital on my portfolio.
Okay, wow, those are really great tips. It's almost like we all have to adopt your mindset, right? Would you say you're the kind of person who then invests in experiences more? There's been a trend towards that.
That's a very, very good observation you did there. I love experiences. I love to travel. So one of the, I would say, my most expensive expenses is clearly traveling. So I love to travel. It sort of motivates me as well. Traveling to other countries, for example, allows me to think, I'm here and I want to see more of it. I'm more motivated to invest in, my portfolio.
Absolutely. You've kind of uncovered the motivation for why you do what you do, right? We all have to adopt the Willie Keng mindset. So let's bring it back to stock investing. Let's talk about those who are just starting out. What simple yet effective strategies would you recommend to build confidence as they embark on building their stock portfolio?
So a couple of things here. When you're starting out, you might not have a large capital to begin with. Maybe to get $100,000, maybe you might want to hit your first $10,000, and that means you might be looking. You might not be looking at stocks, for example. You might not have the time, so you might be looking at first ETFs is one of them. So in an index fund helps you a lot to sort of get started, because the difference between a stock and an ETF buys into a basket of different stocks. So it helps to, what I call, remove that ups and downs of the stock market. So that sort of calms your nerves every time when the stock market sort of sell off. It prevents you or trying to reduce that risk of you trying to sell it off at the wrong time. Unlike stocks where it can be a bit more volatile and that could affect your psychology. So one way is to get started maybe through an ETF if you might not have time to do individual stock picking. The second one which I would do is to get started on reading. So for me, I love to look at the letters of Warren Buffett. I read a lot of what he does. So I try not to be the next Warren Buffett, but what I do is I try to gain some of the insights. For example, what he does in his daily life. So he doesn't just read, but what many people don't know about him is he tends to fly across the country in the US to meet different people, influential people, networks a lot, he makes a lot of friends. So he builds that knowledge there, and it doesn't cost money, right? You can buy someone coffee. These days you have social media, you have Zoom, you can easily connect with anyone across the world to sort of build that knowledge first. I always believe that knowledge is where the gold mine is, and it might not translate to that dollar value initially, but it helps to build that returns at a later part or the later stage, because a lot of different fields, if you read different fields and you start cross-pollinating them, you're able to get better insights, and that translates to much better returns for your portfolio.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you build a good rapport, you might potentially see returns, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. You talked about lowering anxiety, right? Which falls under the category of emotional investing. So would you say maybe stay away or veer away from emotional investing and keep your anxiety down to build confidence? Would you agree with me?
So I would partially agree with you on that. Rather than staying away, I would lean into the emotions, because at the end of the day, it's very difficult to say, I remain objective. All of us have emotions at the end of the day. It's about trying to accept the emotions at that point in time and think about objectively what we are going to do about it. It's a lot like, taking risk, right? When you're investing, There's always some form of risk which you're going to take. But does it mean we are trying to move away from that risk? Not so. We have to lean in and accept the kind of risk we have in the investment and see, okay, for this certain risk, am I willing to accept it for the returns on the investment? So similar for our emotions for investing. Rather than trying to shy away from the emotions, trying to shy away from how we react to the stock market, I would say lean into it and think about, okay, what happens when a stock sell-off? How is my emotions reacting? And is this justifiable? Is it logical that my emotions are reacting this way? For example, if the stock market is down 20%, naturally I start to feel anxious and fearful. But does it mean that my investments are going wrong? So that's where I start to take out, for example, my research, my Excel spreadsheet, and I see, okay, is the business still doing well? Is the business still making money? So I try to complement the emotions of what I have to the research which I've done.
Absolutely, it's a holistic approach. Do you have any additional thoughts, Willie?
When we are all starting out investing and to build that $100,000 portfolio, the first thing which I will always tell investors or beginner investors is don't take leverage. That means don't take on debt. And the reason why is that can kill you. I've seen many cases throughout my last 13 years of my investing journey. I used to work in the banking industry. I've seen private clients, for example, who are beginner investors. They take on leverage because interest rates were so low back then. So they borrowed money from the bank. They invested in stocks. They invested in bonds. And what happens when interest rates starts to go up, which we have seen over the last couple of years, a lot of the investments went sour. It wasn't because that they invested into the wrong stocks or bonds, but just so because the value of this asset starts to drop, that actually forced them to do a margin call, and they actually lost a lot of money because of that. So that's actually one example. Another example, of course, is for myself. I used to borrow some money from my friends and family, and I made, tens of thousands of dollars in mistake on one single stock, and that was my own version of taking on leverage because I was borrowing from other people, but it didn't turn out well. Right? I was overconfident. I got too overconfident on myself, and didn't really went too well in terms of the investment. That's why I lost quite a bit of money, not just my own money, but also other people's money as well. So don't take on leverage. Use your own capital to get started. Right? It might not be a huge amount, but the most important thing is to just keep going. Eventually, that amount will accumulate and compound itself to a comfortable figure which you like.
Yeah, okay. It's been a comfortable interview with you, Willie. Okay, lots of insights there. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll chat again soon.
Thank you, Roshan.
It's not just about the numbers. It's about the journey and what it means for our financial future. Remember, whether you're just starting out or well on your way, that 100K stock portfolio is within reach. You've been watching Teatime Tuesday. Until next time, keep seeking knowledge and financial empowerment.